Everyone laughed when a 69-year-old woman walked onto the mat. But 8 seconds later, their undefeated coach was tapping out, begging for release. She didn't come to prove anything, but she changed everything. I stepped into the Jiu-Jitsu academy that morning, my silver hair tied back in a simple bun, my kimono freshly pressed. "Take a hike, Grandma." Coach Jackson scoffed, loud enough to set off a wave of laughter across the room. But when he invited me to spar, not a soul there, including him, had the faintest idea what was coming. I folded my white kimono with care and tucked it into my worn gym bag. At 69, I moved with intention, not fast, maybe, but every motion had purpose. Discipline becomes second nature when you've practiced it for most of your life. My fingers brushed across the fabric of my old black belt, its edges fraying like paper from years of use. Each thread carried a story, each tear a lesson from 4 decades on the mat. That same morning, sunlight spilled through the windows of my small apartment. I'd only been living in this quiet rural outskirts of Auburn for about 4 weeks, trying to start over after losing my husband. It hadn't been easy, starting fresh never is, but I've never been the kind to let life push me down without pushing back. Once I'd unpacked the basics and made the place feel like mine, there was just one more thing left on the list: find a new dojo. "Your joints aren't getting any younger, Edie," I muttered, stretching out my knees with a quiet groan as I stood. My doctor had said it plain: either stay active or start deteriorating. For me, there was never any real debate. I knew which way I was going. I gave myself a once-over in the mirror, hair neat, face weathered but proud, and eyes that still had some fire in them. I gave myself a nod, the same small gesture I'd done before every training session since 1978, back when I first stepped onto a mat at 28. Most folks don't know my history with Jiu-Jitsu. I trained under Master Takahashi for 15 years until he passed away. Got my black belt during a time when women in martial arts were few and far between. And even while raising 3 kids and supporting my husband's work as a school principal, I kept training. Quietly, steadily. Eventually earned my second-degree black belt. Never made a big deal out of it. I was never one to brag. Still, the years of training showed in how I moved, in my reactions, in the quiet steadiness I carried with me everywhere. First day at a new dojo, I reminded myself as I grabbed my car keys. Just like getting back on a bike. It took me about 12 minutes to drive to Summit Grappling Center. From the outside, the place looked top tier. Big glass windows, sleek signage, and a wide parking lot filled with polished SUVs and flashy sports cars. My little sedan stuck out like a sore thumb among them. I sat for a moment, watching a stream of young men and women, 20s, maybe 30s, walk confidently into the building. They all looked like they belonged on fitness magazine covers, dressed in designer gym gear with earbuds in and protein shakes in hand. I took a deep breath, adjusted my simple white kimono, and stepped out of the car. Inside, the receptionist barely masked her surprise as I approached the front desk. Young, with not a single hair out of place, she blinked at me like I'd wandered into the wrong building. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice polite but tinged with doubt. "Yes," I said calmly. "I'm here to join the Jiu-Jitsu program." Her eyebrows inched up. "Our adult classes are very intense," she offered, trying to be helpful in a condescending sort of way. "We do have a senior yoga group that meets Tuesday mornings." I gave her a warm smile. "That's sweet of you, but I've been training in Jiu-Jitsu for over 40 years. I'm looking to continue, not start over." Her face flickered with surprise, but she quickly snapped back into professional mode. "Well, we've got an open mat starting in 12 minutes, she said. "New students can watch first and speak to a coach about joining afterward." "That sounds great," I replied. She slid a stack of paperwork across the desk. "You'll need to fill out these waivers. Coach Jackson will be doing the evaluations today." I signed each form with a steady hand, pretending not to notice her lingering look, the kind that asked, "What is this old woman doing here?" As I headed toward the changing rooms, I could feel her gaze trailing after me, full of curiosity, doubt, maybe even a little pity. But I didn't mind. I knew exactly what I was doing. I couldn't help but smile to myself. Wouldn't be the first time someone looked at me and assumed I didn't belong. The main training floor at Summit Grappling Center was something to see: bright, clean, and outfitted with top-of-the-line gear. The mats were spotless, and everything had a polished, professional feel. Around 20 students were already warming up, most in white or blue kimonos, their belts showing off a range of ranks. Their movements were sharp and full of energy. You could hear the slap of bare feet on the mats, the steady breathing that came with practiced effort. I stood at the edge of the room for a moment, observing quietly. Everything they were doing, I'd done it more times than I could count. Basic drills, solid form, focused energy. The coaching seemed strong, and the vibe in the room was respectful. Honestly, it was just the kind of place I'd hoped to find. Then I spotted him, Coach Brian Ellison. Mid-30s, tall, solid build, and clearly very sure of himself. He walked like a man who didn't expect to be questioned. His blue kimono was plastered with competition patches, and his black belt looked like it had been tied with a ruler. He moved through the class correcting postures and demonstrating techniques, soaking in the quiet respect of his students. When his eyes finally landed on me, he froze for a beat. Then that look, the one I'd seen too many times, spread across his face, surprise, quickly followed by amusement. He leaned over to whisper something to one of his students, a buff guy in a purple belt, who glanced at me and chuckled. I didn't flinch. I walked calmly onto the mat and bowed, as tradition calls for. Slowly, the room started to quiet down as more students took notice of the elderly woman in a plain white GI. Coach Jackson raised his voice from across the mat, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he called, that smirk practically baked into his tone. "I think you might be in the wrong room." Senior Tai Chi's down the hall in the smaller studio. A low ripple of barely held laughter passed through the room, but I stayed steady, not giving them the satisfaction of a reaction. "I'm here for the Jiu-Jitsu class," I said plainly, my voice even and strong. "I just moved to town, and I'm looking for a place to continue training." Coach Jackson looked over at a few of his more experienced students, the corners of his mouth twitching wider into a grin. "Training? At your age," he said, not bothering to hide his disbelief. "No offense, ma'am, but Jiu-Jitsu isn't exactly gentle yoga. This is a combat sport, and we train to compete." "I know what Jiu-Jitsu is," I answered calmly. "I've been practicing since 1978. That drew another round of stifled giggles from the group. Jackson's smile took on a smug, condescending edge. "Look, Grandma," he said, dragging out the word to earn more laughs from his students, "it's great that you're enthusiastic, but this place isn't set up for beginners, especially not ones who could seriously hurt themselves." I didn't budge. My eyes stayed locked on his. "I get your concern," I said evenly, "but I can handle myself." "Yeah? Can you even get up off the mat without help?" one of the blue belts called out, setting off another wave of laughter. Jackson lifted a hand to quiet them, but the smirk stayed on his face. "So, what belt do you say you are?" he asked, leaning into that word say like he thought I was making it up. "I'm not saying anything," I replied, unshaken. "I earned my second-degree black belt under Master Kenji Mori. Back in '95. Most of the students didn't react to the name, but Jackson did. For just a split second, his face changed. He knew who that was. Takahashi wasn't a household name, but anyone serious about the art knew the weight it carried. Jackson recovered quickly, that smug grin sliding right back into place. "Well," he said with a shrug, "I'm sure things were different back then. Standards are a bit higher now." He motioned toward the visitors area with a dramatic sweep of his arm. "Why don't you watch today's class from over there? It might help you decide if this is really the right place for someone with your experience." The message was clear, even if it came dressed up in polite concern. He was brushing me off. And judging by the smirks on a few students' faces, they were getting a real kick out of seeing the old lady put in her place. But I hadn't spent 40 years on the mat to get shooed away like some confused tourist. "I didn't come here to watch," I said, my voice steady but firm, just loud enough to cut through the chuckles and shift the room's energy. "I came to train." Coach Jackson's smile wavered. Just a little. He hadn't expected that. Around the room, students started glancing at each other. The laughter slowed, replaced by a flicker of interest. Maybe even a little respect. "Ma'am," Jackson began, using that overly careful tone people take when they think you're fragile or confused. "We've got insurance policies and safety standards to consider. I can't just throw someone in your condition into an advanced class without a proper evaluation." "That's fair," I replied with a nod. "Then evaluate me." A few students snorted, trying not to laugh again. Jackson crossed his arms, his confidence sliding back into place. He clearly enjoyed having a live audience for this. "You want me to evaluate you?" he asked, eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Right now. That's what I'm here for," I said, plain and simple. He turned to his students with a dramatic shrug, playing it up for the crowd. "Well, class, looks like we've got a change of plans today. Apparently, we're conducting a special evaluation." He motioned toward a young man in a blue belt. "Mike, come here. I need a partner for this little demo." Mike walked over with a grin, clearly enjoying the show. "This is Josh Ramirez," Jackson said, glancing back at me. "One of our intermediate guys. If you're serious about training, let's see how you handle a basic role with him." I looked Jackson straight in the eye. "I'd rather work with you, Coach Jackson." The room fell dead silent. Someone in the back muttered a drawn-out "oh," before another quickly hushed them. Coach Jackson's expression changed. Gone was the playful sarcasm. What replaced it was colder, harder. "Me," he said, the humor draining from his voice. "You want to roll with me?" "If you're going to evaluate me," I said evenly, "it should be done the right way. You are the head instructor, aren't you?" The words hung there like a gauntlet. Jackson had no easy way out now. Backing down would make him look weak in front of his students, but stepping up meant physically sparring with someone who could have been his grandmother. Either way, the dynamic had shifted, and he knew it. After a brief pause, the smugness slid back into place. He decided to play it cool, show the class how to handle this kind of situation professionally. His plan, I could tell, was to take it easy on me, demonstrate a few moves, and gently reinforce that this academy wasn't the place for someone my age. "All right then," he said, flashing that confident smile again. "We'll do a light roll. 2 minutes." just to see how you move. He turned to the room. Clear the center mat, please. The students shuffled back to form a wide circle, their eyes locked on the mat like they were about to witness something either ridiculous or legendary. Jackson took off his instructor patch and set it aside with exaggerated care, like he was really getting into character for this little performance. Meanwhile, I stepped into position, calm and unhurried. My body moved smoothly, with the kind of ease that doesn't come from youth, it comes from years of knowing exactly what you're doing. I'll go very light, Jackson announced, making sure everyone heard. Just working through positions, no submissions. Ready, Mrs. Whitaker? I nodded once. It's Lena Whitaker. And I'm ready when you are, coach. The stage was set. Begin, he called, dropping into a traditional starting stance. The room went still. Jackson started circling, slow and measured, clearly trying to look composed. His movements were more for show than substance, and his voice carried as he spoke to the class. In Jiu-Jitsu, it's all about leverage, not strength. That's what makes it great for all kinds of people. And then he reached for my sleeve, planning to demonstrate a simple grip. But the moment his fingers brushed my GI, I shifted, just slightly. Almost too subtle to see. My hand snapped over his wrist with a grip that surprised him. He hadn't even had time to react before I dragged his arm, pulling him slightly off balance. It was clean, precise, textbook. He had no choice but to step forward to catch himself, falling right into my setup. Before he could recover, I dropped into a seated guard. My leg shot out, hooking his ankle, while my grip slid smoothly from his sleeve to his collar. With one swift motion, I pulled him forward and rotated at the hip. The movement flowed, clean, sharp, and shockingly effective. Jackson didn't even have time to react. One moment he was upright, the next he was crashing forward, completely caught off guard. His knees hit the mat with a thud. By the time he realized what was happening, I was already in position, technical mount, solid and tight. Not exactly what you'd expect from a 69-year-old woman taking on a black belt in his prime. A collective gasp rippled through the room. What the Jackson started, scrambling to get his bearings, but his cool demeanor had cracked. I didn't pause. My hands moved instinctively, taking control, securing grips he couldn't just muscle out of, not without the right technique. Anyway, still trying to catch up, Jackson did something no experienced fighter should ever do. He pushed against me directly. It was the kind of rookie mistake a trained grappler could see coming a mile away. I used it, of course, redirected his force, opened him up, and slid right into an armbar transition as clean as clockwork. He saw the danger, just not in time. He tried to stack and pass, but by then he was already caught. Everything had lined up perfectly. The armbar locked in tight. His arm fully extended, completely under my control, the pressure mounting slowly but steadily. Tap. He choked out, slapping the mat with his free hand. The whole thing had taken less than 8 seconds. The room fell into stunned silence. No one moved. No one spoke. They just stood there, mouths open, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. The elderly woman they'd laughed at had just submitted their dominant, no-nonsense head coach with a move so clean it could have come straight out of an instructional video. I let go the second he tapped and rose to my feet, moving with more ease than most would expect from someone my age. I brushed off my kimono, straightened it, then bowed toward Jackson, respectfully, as always. Thank you for the evaluation, Coach Jackson, I said calmly. I trust that addresses your concerns about my abilities. Still, no one spoke. You could hear the faintest shuffle of feet on the mats, but not a single whisper. They were all frozen. They just watched the impossible unfold right in front of them. Jackson stayed kneeling, his face flushed, caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. Finally, he looked up at me, voice quiet, broken by confusion. Who are you? He finally found his voice, though it came out quieter this time. The arrogance was gone. Really? He asked, genuinely now. I adjusted my belt with a small tug. Yes, Lena Whitaker. 2nd degree black belt. Trained under Master Takahashi. One of the older students stepped forward, his eyes suddenly lighting up like something had clicked. Wait. Takahashi? As in the Takahashi, the guy who trained all those champions in the 90s. He looked at me again, closer now. You're that Lena Whitaker? I gave a modest nod. I was just one of his students. One of his students? He repeated, clearly excited now. You were his top female competitor. I remember reading about you in those old martial arts journals. Didn't you win Pacific Coast Open? What, for times? A low murmur spread through the room like wind stirring dry leaves. Recognition was setting in. Coach Jackson's face shifted from embarrassment to something that looked a lot like realization. Maybe even awe. That was a long time ago, I said gently. I never really cared for the spotlight. It was always about the practice itself. Jackson cleared his throat, visibly trying to pull himself back together. His pride had clearly taken a hit, but to his credit, some of that martial discipline showed up when it mattered. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, giving me a formal bow. I owe you an apology. I was rude and completely out of line. That's not the example an instructor should set. I gave him a small nod. We all make quick judgments, I said. It's human. What matters is whether we're willing to change them when the truth is right in front of us. A young woman with a purple belt stepped forward, wide-eyed. Ma'am, that our bar. You made it look effortless. Would you mind showing us again? I glanced over at Jackson, raising an eyebrow to check if he was okay with that. He hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. I think we all have something to learn today, he said, his voice carrying something I hadn't heard from him before, genuine respect. If Mrs. Whitaker is willing. And just like that, the day's training session turned into something else entirely. For the next hour, I walked them through techniques I'd practiced for decades. Slow, precise, deliberate. My speed wasn't what it used to be, sure, but my timing, my understanding of leverage, that had only sharpened with time. What surprised them most, I think, wasn't the moves themselves, but how I broke them down. The little angle tweaks that made a hold stick. The exact moment to shift your weight for better control. The patience it takes to wait for an opening rather than force one. To his credit, Jackson joined in fully. He asked good questions, helped me demonstrate transitions, and listened, really listened. I could see the shift in him. The ego faded, replaced by curiosity, appreciation, maybe even a little respect. As I've learned over these 46 years, I told the class as we broke down a complicated guard pass, Jiu-Jitsu was never about strength or speed. Those things fade. What stays is the understanding, the principles. Leverage, timing, balance, and above all else, respect. For your opponent, and for yourself. The students sat or stood around me, fully focused now, their earlier laughter long gone. Something had shifted in the room. They felt it too. What had walked into their dojo wasn't just an old woman in a white GI. It was something rare, something real. By the time class wrapped up, the entire energy in the space had changed. The same students who'd smirked when I arrived were now lining up to ask questions. Real questions. Thoughtful ones. Each interaction carried a new weight, respect, not pity. And I answered everyone with patience, sharing what I knew without talking down, happy to pass along pieces of what had taken me decades to learn. Coach Jackson stood off to the side, watching quietly. There was something different in his face too, less ego, more reflection. When the last student stepped away, he came over again. Mrs. Whitaker, he began, and this time, there was no trace of that forced charm from earlier. His voice was honest. I'd like to offer you a position here at Elite. I raised a brow, caught off guard. That, I hadn't expected. We have a few women's classes and youth programs that could really benefit from your experience, he explained. Your technical skill is honestly on another level. I didn't come looking for a job, Coach Jackson, I said with a small smile. I was just hoping to find a place to train. That's all. Of course, he said quickly. You'd have full access to the academy anytime. But I hope you'll consider sharing what you know too. Even if it's just one class a week, what you taught today was invaluable. I paused, thinking. This wasn't how I thought the day would go. I'd come through those doors just wanting a place to move, to keep sharp, to quietly be part of a new community. But maybe this could be something more. I'll think about it, I said. But there's one condition. Name it, he said without hesitation. This dojo, I said, meeting his eyes, has to be a place of respect. For everyone who walks in, regardless of age, gender, or what they look like. What happened today, how I was treated, shouldn't happen to anyone else who comes here to learn. Jackson held my gaze and nodded, taking it in. No defense. No excuses. Just a quiet acceptance of the truth. I understand, he said. And I could tell he meant it. That's a principle I should have been upholding all along, Jackson said quietly. Consider it a promise. As I gathered my things, a few students bowed to me formally, respectfully. That kind of gesture was usually reserved for the head instructor, and I didn't take it lightly. See you Thursday, Sensei Whitaker? Asked the young woman in the purple belt, hope written all over her face. I smiled. Thursday would be fine. On my way out, I noticed a small group of older adults standing outside, peering through the glass windows near reception. They must have caught glimpses of the lesson, and now they were deep in animated conversation, pointing toward the mat, whispering excitedly. The receptionist, the same young woman who doubted me earlier, walked over looking slightly flustered. Ma'am, she said, we've got a few people asking if we offer any classes for, more mature students. They saw you teaching. They want to know if you would be leading anything. I couldn't help but grin. Maybe this new chapter in my life was going to be a little more interesting than I'd thought. Tell them to come back on Thursday, I said. We'll see what we can do. Underscore 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 underscore. Underscore 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 underscore. 3 months later, Summit Grappling Center looked very different. What used to be a competitive hub mainly filled with young athletes had grown into something more, something better. It had become a community, a real one. 3 times a week, I led a class we'd started calling the Foundation Session. It was open to everyone, regardless of age, background, or experience. We didn't focus on flashy submissions or tournament prep. Instead, I taught what had always been at the heart of Jiu-Jitsu: structure, timing, positioning, and control. Funny thing was, those classes quickly became the most popular ones on the schedule. The younger students realized that working on the basics with care actually made them better in competition. Their control tightened. Their transitions became smoother. As for the older folks, they found a way to train that felt safe, effective, and empowering without having to keep up with 20-somethings on the mat. And perhaps most surprising of all, Coach Jackson was there every week, not standing off to the side, either. He was in it, often volunteering as my demonstration partner, asking thoughtful questions, eager to keep learning. He never said it out loud, but I could tell he wasn't just teaching anymore. He was growing, and so was I. Whatever embarrassment Jackson had felt that first day was long gone. What replaced it was something far more powerful, respect, and a real hunger to learn. Mrs. Whitaker has probably forgotten more about pressure distribution than most of us will ever learn. He once told a regional sports reporter who came to do a piece on our unlikely teaching partnership. That day, the academy was hosting a small in-house tournament. It was a friendly event, with competitors of all ages and belt levels stepping onto the mat. Jackson and I sat side by side, co-judging each match, offering insights and scoring with fairness. Between divisions, we paused to demonstrate key techniques for the crowd. Jackson assisted while I explained the subtle things, what spectators should look for, what made a good match great. Notice how it's leverage, not strength, that opens up the submission, I said, as I moved through a slow, deliberate demonstration of a technical R-bar on Jackson. When done right, this works for anyone, regardless of size or age. I saw a few older spectators leaning in closely, nodding along. They were part of a group that had grown since I arrived, folks affectionately called the Silver Belts. Seniors, retirees, people who thought their training years were long behind them, until they heard my story. "She's changed everything," one of Elite's longtime instructors whispered to a visitor watching the event. Not just for the older students, for all of us. She reminded us what really matters in Jiu-Jitsu. Out on the mat, I caught sight of someone stepping through the academy doors. An older gentleman, walking cautiously with a cane. His eyes scanned the room with the same mix of curiosity and hesitation I remembered so well, because I'd felt it myself just a few months earlier. I smiled. Coach Jackson saw me looking and followed my gaze. He spotted the man immediately, and without needing a word from me, he walked over, bowed respectfully, and personally guided the newcomer to a chair near the viewing area. Some lessons, I've learned, go far beyond wrist locks or sweeps. Sometimes the most important things we teach aren't techniques at all. If this story moved you, don't forget, appearances can mislead, but wisdom often wears the face of quiet persistence. Have you ever been underestimated? Or seen someone else judged unfairly? Share your experience in the comments below, and if Edith's story struck a chord, make sure to subscribe for more inspirational tales that remind us to look beyond the surface. Let us know where you're watching from, and which part of Edith's journey resonated with you the most. Until next time, remember, respect is earned, not demanded. True mastery is proven through action, not words. And the oldest tree in the forest? It usually has the deepest roots.